Okay.
Keeps my hair warm.
Me too.
Thanks, everybody. Good evening, or afternoon meeting for 1:15 EDIC is in session. We have minutes from October. I have copies if anybody needs any. I think it's one page backsided.
Well.
It's been forever.
A couple more.
Couple more.
Oh, sure. If you want to review them.
So terrible.
Do we also have the September ones, Dave?
I don't have a paper form.
Because we never had the opportunity to review and approve them at the October meeting.
Oh, that's right.
We didn't?
Nope.
Okay.
Because we accidentally brought the May ones.
No, and you, no, and you mentioned that last time too.
Do enough people remember it?
Sure.
Sure we do.
Yeah.
Or no, maybe the right question, Josh, is are enough people comfortable voting to approve the minutes of September?
There you go. We can ask that question.
Let me ask who did them. Was it Josh or was it Gwen?
Probably
Josh.
Okay, well, maybe we want to take another look. I'm just kidding. Just kidding,
Nice, Tom.
just kidding, just kidding. I would make a motion to accept the September and October minutes.
I have a second.
Anybody got discussion, I mean? Okay, all in favor? John, you have anything for public speak? No?
No.
You're good,
Yeah,
okay.
one thing, what's happening with the dam on Northampton Street? I read an article about it, there was some problem with it.
Does anybody know?
Manhan,
Yeah,
fish ladder? Don't know.
Nothing that we're in tune to, so. Well, you have to speak to the city engineer. Right? That's who runs it? That's who oversees the dam?
Sounds like a good place to start. I have no knowledge of what.
Unless it breaks, then you're involved.
I don't even think it, no.
No.
Man-made, so if it breaks, it just goes back to its natural state, right?
I wish it would.
Just warning people downstream a little bit.
Yeah. All right, Jeff, you have anything to mention?
Sure, yeah, if you don't mind, I would like to just give a quick update. So, I was saying before the meeting started, we had a large number of grants that were submitted and applied for, and we've been extremely successful. All of the grants are now accounted for. There was one, I will say, that we submitted to have the city, to get a consultant to do a ADA transition plan. So it's a Americans with Disabilities Act evaluation of all the city-owned buildings, and they do some evaluation of sidewalks and things like that. We applied for $30,000 to have that completed, and we were not awarded that grant. But the letters seem to suggest that there could be mid-fiscal year, I guess it's mid-year, another funding round. So while we didn't get that grant, there seemed to be some optimism in the letter. So that's the one that we didn't get, although we tried pretty hard to get that one. We received the park grant recently, so it's a $400,000 grant towards the acquisition of the parcels on Mount Tom. That is something where that was the biggest piece of the financial puzzle. So there is one more grant that Kestrel Land Trust had applied for that's outstanding that would fill in an approximately $50,000 gap towards the costs. They seemed very optimistic with that. And so that's an FY20 award. So as of July 1st, we would have access to that. And the beauty of the entire scenario is that the owner gave the city until September 2019 to complete the acquisition. So that should be sort of really perfect timing to complete that acquisition. Related to that, it's more just information at this point. My office is trying to submit for a Mass Trails grant. The submission is due February 1st. And I am going to be speaking to the Community Preservation Act Committee on Thursday to see if they will set aside or talk about potentially having the match that would go along with the grant. We're a little bit proactive where we don't have a cost estimate for design, but the grant would allow us to potentially work with someone to design a parking area and an accessible trail on that property. So the beauty of that seems to be that the city doesn't technically need to own it in order to make the application. They need a willing property owner. So, I'm gonna have some discussions with the property owner to make sure that he's willing to continue moving forward with the vision for that property. So that's pretty exciting. Some of you got invited to a day-long workshop in February for the Municipal Vulnerability Preparedness Project. So it's called MVP. And what it's going to be it's a stakeholder workshop to look at climate change and where the city may be potentially vulnerable, whether it's generators at schools, dams, or other. We have a lot of water. So some of you were invited to the day-long workshop, and as a result of that, there'll be a public meeting to review the findings and involve a broader public. So there's a workshop in February, and that project concludes in like June. So there'll be more
What
on
was
that.
the acronym again? What was the name of it?
MVP,
And what did it stand for?
Municipal Vulnerability Preparedness. So that was a grant that we got back in May. That's funding that.
Okay.
I won't drone on too much longer, but we are initiating the project with the Conway School. So we have a small contract with the Conway School of Landscape Architecture and Design to begin doing some baseline assessment of the ability to connect bikes and pedestrians to the new school. So we're in the process of refining the scope. And it's primarily oriented from the bike path to the Whitebrook property. But in the initial meeting, we were in here and we were looking at maps and things. And there is another element that will be not done completely in depth, but we're gonna look at trying to connect basically from Plain Street to the Whitebrook property. There's a series of protected open space parcels. So that element will be sort of very high level, and it might set up sort of 2 or 3 key additional pieces of information that we would pursue on that side in the future. But what we're really looking to do is see if there's a path or possible pathways more through either Nonotuck or the Williston property or Park Street or some more immediate connection. They're looking to hold some kind of community meeting at the I guess the early February as well. So they want to have as many members of the public who would be interested come to that, especially parents with kids, basically, with some information about how they're currently getting to schools. So there'll be more advertising of that, but I didn't want that to come out of left field for this group, because I would love to extend that invitation to this group to come to that meeting when we don't even have a date yet. But
Oh,
so
When you mentioned that at the school building committee meeting,
yes,
just quickly, and everyone assumes, well, everyone, that's the wrong word, but everyone thinks about the path coming to Whitebrook, coming to the parks, either to the Williston property or to off of Halford Way. But it's long. There's another path as well. If you go all the way down into the new soccer fields on that road, and you keep following that road to the end, you go by the water station. There's a fence, and that land, that where it stops, I believe it's city land right adjacent to Treehouse.
okay,
So anyway, there's a path there as well. It's not a shortcut. It's a long cut, but there's a
Right.
road that goes basically, there's a little bit of a hill, but, I think it's on the city land, city parcel next to Treehouse, then it's right next to Treehouse is.
So it's
probably up-
behind the existing white brick building?
No, so if you're standing behind White Brook, you have White Brook, you have Treehouse,
Mhm.
then there's a city parcel.
Oh, right, okay, yeah.
So it
yeah,
comes
yeah.
out in the corner of that city parcel adjacent to Treehouse. And there is some grade issues, but I think it's only about 200 yards from the driveway of Treehouse. I'm just saying there's another path.
Nope, I think that's good. And that's one of their, requests is to take a big picture look and to make sure that we have identified all the current paths that get people to that property and sort of there in between.
Yeah.
And I'll just say, I mean, we're not ignoring, Park Street, so from the center of town, you can go on a sidewalk up Park Street all the way to the school. So there is some funding available through the Safe Routes to School to potentially make that sidewalk larger. But that probably wouldn't be the only option that we'd like to have laid out. And so some of that work would be done in consultation with the school building committee. So I did a quick presentation to that group to make sure that when the site plan for the school is being created, that there's a potential for a path to poke out of the woods and then kind of enter into the sidewalks that are being proposed for that. And so that seems like that should work.
It seemed like everyone was agreeable to
Yeah.
it at the meetings.
Yeah, so that's good. We are continuing to work on revision to the subdivision regulations. I haven't mentioned that in a while. That project is set to end at June 2019. So we're working with a group of communities in Pioneer Valley Planning Commission to come up with a model subdivision ordinance. And then we would have an Easthampton version that could be updated. The last time it was updated is 1990. So that's just a project that kind of been chugging away on, so to speak. And then the last thing that I'll mention right now is the planning grant, so the Downtown Strategic Planning Grant. We went through the request for proposals process and we have selected a consultant. So I can't have you guys keep these, but we can, this is the, these will be public at some point. It's not that it's a private document. I just have to retain these copies for a little bit longer. But the consultant is Harriman Associates, so they used to be Cecil Group, and the Cecil Group did some work with the city for the Union Street Complete Streets study. And so I am gonna hand out, this is more, my request is if you were interested and wanted to look at the project approach and the scope of services, sorry, I don't know how many copies I made.
There's a project approach. That's one.
It's very in-depth, there's a lot of elements to this project, so within the next week or so, if any of you wanted to look at this and had specific questions or find something that's glaringly obviously missing or incorrect, I would be happy to receive an email. We're going to be going through the process to sign a contract with the consultant.
Jeff, this is for all of downtown?
It's primarily for Cottage Street and Union Street.
Okay.
And the purpose of this is to look at that area holistically as it relates to the two school properties.
Can
So-
this be made available in PDF form by the consultant?
I think it can be. I
Well, I
believe-
think that
yeah.
if it was available within a couple of days, these things they're lengthy, but they're always worth digging into.
Yeah, what I made copies of is the project approach and scope of services. The rest of the response is their qualifications.
Is this specific to Easthampton, this
The-
project?
After the project approach, it is specific to Easthampton.
So this is the one you referred to before that specifically was born out of the, looking at the reuse of the two schools downtown?
Correct.
This is the grant that was submitted, right?
Yep, this was the $50,000.
Is this, were these guys awarded, or is this a runner in it?
No, we have selected this.
Okay.
This consultant is going to be our. I mean, so this is preliminary. scope of services that may change, which is why I wanted to offer it to this group for anything that's like glaringly off or could be potentially missing. We're gonna be starting discussions to refine the scope and then create a contract and sign a contract. So, originally we thought that this project had to be completed by June 2019, but in the state award, they've extended it into 2020, which is great because it gives us more time to set up the scope now, and we have a little bit more time to create the scope, and then the consultant is interested in doing a fast and compact concentrated study, but we'll probably go beyond June into July and August. So
So, do you
we'll
think
create
our-
a revised timeline, but I'm expecting this to be a final plan probably late August or September.
So would our next scheduled meeting fit your timeline if people had comments? Or do you want them sooner?
I would like them sooner if possible. I know it's a
No,
lot to
I'm
ask.
just asking it now, I mean, yeah, okay.
So, I like the concept here that rather than just, as we've done in the past, rather than just focusing on the issue of 2 empty schools,
Right.
it's looking at the view from 30,000 feet of Union and Cottage strategically, and, oh, by the way, how do these 2 empty schools fit into this bigger plan?
Right. Yeah, because I
like
think,
it. I like it.
yeah, the approach was to look at the 2 schools in a vacuum, would ignore the surroundings, which are going to be a factor. So there's parking. We've asked for a lot, so there are going to be probably a couple things that get pulled out. And the one element that I know is on the table is the 40R district. What we asked for was a complete sort of assessment and a complete inventory of the entire 40R. So that may be one of the things that we narrow that scope down so that we want the 40R to work well for the schools if they were to be redeveloped.
The
But-
40R is the overlay, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
So it allows higher density housing. Because we may want to beef up the school discussion. So it'll be kind of a trading off, getting a little bit more time and attention to the schools. So,
Will they get real specific on those recommendations? Because as we heard the other night, part of the conflict that's gonna come in is, do the buildings stay or do the buildings go?
Yeah.
Can the buildings stay or can the buildings go? And there's gonna be a lot of opinions on both sides of that discussion.
yeah, I think it's a great question. I mean, I think that there are people who want to express their thoughts about the schools.
But I was wondering, will these guys come back with a recommendation that say, if you were to remove the buildings, you could do this?
Yeah, I think it's not gonna be general, but it's not gonna be the final determination of what's gonna happen with the schools. So,
Because we could put out RFPs and
Right.
there's nobody interested in doing the design that they want, the
Right.
concept they want. They
Exactly.
it's
this
moot.
should lay
They're-
out,
They're laying out general guidelines of
Yeah.
what the community is assessed
yes.
based on public discussion.
My expectation is that, sort of, for one example, there would be scenario A, which is Maple Street stays, and then you talk about what it would be used for, and then what would the parking be needed for that use on the property, and could we have public parking attached to that? And then, a scenario would be if the school were not on the property, if it were a vacant site, how many parking spaces could it be if it was just parking?
Right.
And then the third option would be, what if it were a newly configured building that was more sort of specific to the site? Could there be like a third scenario? So
Right.
they will run scenarios based on the public input.
And not that it's all about money, but for the city, it's a little bit about money. And we know from our experience on Parsons Street, the city's gonna get a lot more money if they're not faced with the constraint of forced to keep the building.
Yeah.
Is the Easthampton Historical Society involved in any way? Or is there a historical entity that's involved with it in terms of the
Well,
buildings?
in Easthampton, there's 2 things. There's the Easthampton Historical Society is a nonprofit, lack of a better word, club. I mean, but then Easthampton has a historical commission,
Okay,
which has.
so I assume that's involved.
Yeah, there's definitely a request in there to look at the reuse of the schools. Involved in that is whether it's feasible to reuse them. And the expectation is we would run a series of scenarios that we would then use to jump off for another. This won't solve everyone's
Right.
questions, it won't answer all the questions, but
And
it's
it's
gonna
gonna
give
be
us a
case by
basis.
case basis.
But I think,
Yeah.
Dave or Jeff, I think, back to Josh's point for a moment, let's just say at the end of the day that the recommendation was that a bidder, a potential bidder for the properties could do whatever, renovate, demolish, do whatever. I think the historical commission has an opportunity to step in and say, wait a minute, these are historical, and I believe they can delay but not stop.
Well, the delay bylaw is very straightforward. Any building over 50 years old is under that jurisdiction.
Right.
I
Obviously.
mean, yeah, I think that we have a historic commission and they will be invited to the meetings, obviously,
Right.
for the discussion. Primarily, it's the EDIC and potentially the city council property subcommittee. That would be the two committees most closely involved in participating with the consultant. But if you look at the school property assessment, there's an initial meeting and site walk, data collection, and then there's a public meeting. So, they will share existing condition information of the school properties and seek feedback from the community about reuse and what aspects should be preserved. Then there's reuse scenario alternatives. So based on the input received, and there's a market analysis of sustainable uses. The team will develop 2 or 3 reuse scenarios for each school sites. They'll clarify and coordinate the reuse scenarios with city staff and downtown. So they do call for a committee to be part of this. So we have some refining to do, but then there's a bunch of bullets. I don't want to read it all, but they will at the end refine the preferred reuse scenarios and establish next steps and implementation strategies. So if we can hone in on a couple of the best potential reuses of the schools, it'll then dictate how we are going to use the next couple of years to focus and move towards making that a reality. So again, we asked for a lot, so my understanding is that there will be some refinement of this list, but we are very excited about the consultant that we were able to select. They have a lot of expertise.
So
Jeff-
when you, go for it.
The charrette that they're considering doing, like, who would be involved with that?
It would be open to the public,
Okay.
but we would want sort of members, we haven't figured all this out, so
Okay.
I think
I'm
there's
just
a
wondering,
lot.
like, is it open or would
It would be
an
definitely open to the
invitation?
public. I mean, I think that's the
Invitational?
key element, is to get people in we want all thoughts about these schools identified, cataloged, and prioritized as a result of this
But if we
study.
can go in having discussions beforehand, so when people have questions or opinions, we can then give them histories and answers to.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's gonna depend on how they approach it. Usually, there's some strategies where you don't wanna front load too much and you wanna just be
Well, I
able to
think the
collect
public-
people's their thoughts, and then that's the consultant's job, is to then rank
Just
them, yeah,
refine,
condense it.
refine.
So
Yes.
if they give a pre-charrette survey to key stakeholders to better drive focus and content for individual work session agendas.
Right,
That's kind of what
Yep.
I was.
Good, okay, yep.
saying, yeah.
so.
And it's
so
probably, Casey, as we know, it's probably gonna focus on, my gut is, John Q. Public's gonna focus on 2 primary, avenues, parking or housing.
Mm.
It's not a lot more you're gonna do with those parcels than parking or housing.
Yeah, I mean, there are other ideas out there, so whether there's community space, and so it's an evolving conversation, but then what they should be able to do is say under scenario 1, which is that it becomes a community space, that they're gonna dictate they're gonna outline the costs associated with bringing the building up to code, maintenance, how that would function, at least in a preliminary way. So there's gonna be the sort of the market analysis part of it too, so.
So, Tom, correct me if I'm wrong, please. School construction is supposed to start next October 19, right?
Yep.
And the hope is to have the new school open September 2020.
21.
21, that's
Right,
21.
2-year
Yeah.
project.
21.
And it might be,
Yeah,
it might-
no,
it might be, the 21 is definitely locked in still. The October might be actually a little bit later.
Well, no, I just, that's okay, I just, I wasn't sure if it was 2021, but.
The start
so-
might be later. But
These
21 is
recommendations, you
still
said a
on
couple of
track.
years, fall into this timeline.
We're trying.
Yeah.
That's why it was so timely that, you know, as the
Well,
school
wait a minute now,
vote.
wait a minute now. You got enough time.
Well, the way I see it, and I want to be clear, is that, you know, if there are next steps and strategies, there's going to be a need to fund. I mean, it's not going. This isn't going to answer all the questions. So, but it's going to give us the path to pursue. And so, where the state guidance that we've been getting is that you plan, you come up with a list and a strategy, and then you continue to implement something clear. So that's the goal, is to come up with a clear path moving forward towards 2021. And the idea is that by 2021, we would have an RFP that there's consensus on for either of the properties, whether there'll be different uses, but at the end of this process, we would be able to be prepared with a request for proposals for the reuse of the schools.
Now,
And that wouldn't be until 2021.
we do
and then
keep
it's-
referring to Maple and Center. There's no reference to Pepin here?
Pepin is included, yeah.
It's included,
Yeah,
okay.
It is. So it's a lot, it's a big project, but
Right.
I'm expecting to negotiate, talk about contract in the month of January, and maybe have some kind of kickoff in February or end of February, March. So that's the luxury of the state informed us that we can go into 2020. So we want to take the time to set up a timeline and the scope of services now, and then we can focus on the project. So it might be a little bit longer until we're kicking off.
And I think, Jeff, looking at it, you know, the bigger picture again is what's the highest and best use for those three properties? But also, how does that highest and best use fit into the bigger picture?
Right. Well, in here is a request for an updated parking inventory. So we need to know where there's private parking, where there's public parking, because that's going to factor into the potential reuse of the school properties. If parking is a major driver, we need to be able to balance it against some data about what is our current parking situation and the rest, you know, in the vicinity. So there's a lot in here. So again, if you look through this, I'm hoping not for a wholesale rewrite, because this is what the consultant provided. But if there's something that is glaringly missing, or something that is just not right, or that you really think I should know about, please email me so that I can bring it into our discussions with
So-
scope.
These aren't to be given out, how are we to go about that, doing that?
I've given
We can keep these, right?
Yeah, this is the project. I mean, everything else is their qualifications. So.
Yeah. Oh, okay, there's enough of those that handed out.
Yeah.
Did I
If
make
not,
enough
Dave, you
here?
can have
No, I
some.
didn't.
Yeah.
No, just,
I'm okay without one.
Thank you, sir.
Is
I
everyone
mean, if
have
anyone that
one?
wants
I'll
to dig
steal
in.
this one that Tom has.
I can scan this actually.
Yeah.
Just has to go back to.
It's not that it's not a public document. It's just I don't have the ability to get this out yet.
I'm
Yeah.
sure you are.
No, it's fine, I understand, I just wanna make sure anyone that wants to dig into it has access, that's
Okay.
all. You know, and,
I can actually scan this and email the project approach section because I already have a copy.
okay,
I'll do that.
thank you,
Okay.
that's awesome.
Is there anything more in this really needs hidden other than this one page?
Yes, there's a whole document for that's the Union Street Complete Streets Initiative. We have that posted on the planning department's website. So the Cecil Group did that study in 2015. So it informed a lot of the current Union Street redesign project. But that is currently available.
Good.
So you good, Jeff?
Yeah.
Thank
So
you.
you knocked off number 4 and number 8 at the same time.
I have a note too that I've been working, I think I'm gonna try for February to have the arts coordinator come to give an update. I know Casey asked for that, and I've been working on that.
I saw her yesterday.
There's been a series, obviously, November, December are chock full of holidays, and there was vacation in there, so.
Well, then, so if that's the case, we'll just wait till February for
Okay.
number 5.
Dave, one clarification on number 8. It sounds like there might not actually be a future use committee, but this might just be all underneath the planning department?
Well, that's
Well,
a great,
I could retell it to future use, or, I don't have to, I could rephrase it somehow, it's fine.
Because it's bigger than just a committee looking at the 3 schools now. So I don't know that, do we know if the mayor's gonna actually establish a future use committee?
that's a good question.
Yeah, because it seems like they should be
I think
one.
I think
Exactly.
she just talked in general, but I don't think she was definitive in her own mind.
Yeah.
I
So,
think if she were here, it'd be a great question. I mean, I think that all is not lost with this concept of a committee. I think at the conclusion of this strategic plan process, there should be a guiding document
Yeah.
that the future use committee
Committee
would
could
then
take it,
use
implement
and keep
And look at
moving
all,
forward.
and look at all the
Right.
proposals and be able to have a guideline to
Right.
say,
So that,
this had a value, this had a value,
Right.
this
so
had a
that
value.
committee might not be established till 2020.
so I'll just.
Right.
They include references to the school reuse committee, and they merge it with a downtown sounding board as part of who
Yeah.
they're gonna present
And those
scenarios
those
to.
are the parts that we haven't had any discussion with the consultant directly about how this will function, whether it's through the planning department, EDIC, or some future use committee. I think that my only concern would be that I wouldn't want the formation of a new committee to slow us starting this. I
Right.
think it could
Yeah.
be something that the results of this planning study should be able to be a clear like jumping off point for a committee.
Well, so
seems
for our
like the-
purposes, I'm just gonna rephrase it to elementary school reuse.
Yeah,
Right.
because the future use committee was,
Should be-
the only reason it was on our agenda, it's gonna be a mayoral committee.
Yeah.
But it was on our agenda to just keep saying, make sure this is on someone's radar
Yeah.
screen, make sure it's on there, and obviously with this grant, it's
It is.
way up on
Yes.
the radar screen.
Yeah.
Well, it should be a spin-off of the grant.
I think it could be, that would be probably a good
People that
recommendation.
participated
Yeah.
in it
Create the
and sort of
committee. Yeah,
knew-
create the committee.
Yeah, exactly.
There might be some other where like the sounding board idea might be a couple members from EDIC, a couple members from the property subcommittee,
Yeah.
maybe, a planning board member and just kind of build an ad hoc sounding board group. But we haven't gotten into that level of detail with the consultant yet, so.
Okay.
Okay. Paul, by any chance, do you have anything to mention about your other committee?
Yeah. Two things kind of came up. One, we are realizing, at some point in the future, we're going to need an outside consultant.
A grant?
Yes, we're gonna need a grant. I happen to know a guy.
Got a
But, yeah, because really to get a hard cost figure and a real overview of
Uh-huh.
what it really is going to be.
Hours and hours and expertise.
Yeah, and more than what we were able to do on the committee for sure. We need some people to go through every telephone pole in the city to evaluate it, and just a lot of little things. But the other point that needs to be mentioned is that there's a wrinkle in the process to forming a municipal light plant, which is vital to this initiative. In that, in order to form a new city department, you have to have the city council vote to approve that in 2 separate fiscal years, which isn't really an issue. But in addition, because we're a city, it has to go on the ballot to the voters in the next regularly scheduled municipal election.
So you can't get that in 19, it'll be 21.
There's time.
You're sharing good stuff on about that.
So can it go on the ballot before the city council approves it twice? Over 2 fiscal years, right?
Yeah, well, fiscal year ends at the end of,
Oh.
starts in July.
Okay.
So,
Yeah.
now, to form a municipal light plant doesn't cost anything to do, but it's something that we would have to do if we were gonna move forward with this. So it's kind of a no-cost way to start that process, without really committing to anything. But something that we have to do at any point. So, we're gonna make a recommendation to the city council, to get that ball rolling.
It would seem too, I could be wrong on this, but if you got that ball rolling, that would help with the consultant as well. If you're gonna go for a grant, the more things you have done
Prior.
prior,
See the level of commitment.
it just helps, I don't know if it's, I'm not gonna take the grant writer's thunder here, but I know from the past that the more you do now,
Mhm. Oh, yeah. So that's gonna be interesting. It's gonna be we're gonna have a public forum soon. We don't even have a date for that yet, but it'll happen probably, if I had to guess, I'd say March. We also have 2 surveys, one for businesses and one for residential, that we're kind of finalizing, just to kind of gauge the interest and some of the maybe unique needs or things that we haven't, thought of, to see what kind of feedback we could get.
How do you get those out to people?
That's something that we've talked about. In one way, doing it online, like through social media is one avenue. We're hoping that we can get some outreach help from the mayor and the city councilors.
Put some in the paper.
In the paper, yeah, talked about that. We've wondered if the Chamber of Commerce might be an avenue to kind of reach out to some of the business owners in the community who might be interested in this or have any feedback. So there's different ways. But,
Well, in terms of the grant, I'm not volunteering at this point. But one of the early stages of that is to try to figure out if there is funding sources that are compatible with what you'd be looking for. So that's one of the biggest tricks. The things that have been lining up really well is that there are funding sources available for certain things. So if there's any legwork that the committee members can do to try to find, often I think, and you've done like the research with Westfield or any other community that has done any of the research, if you can find funding sources that have been used, that's a huge jumping off point. And I would throw out to have you guys look at maybe the community compact. So the state has the community compact cabinet, and through the community compact there are a series of initiatives that can get funded. So that would be something that would probably be done through the mayor's office. But they do have, on the community compact website, they have a list, and they actually have all the completed studies and documents. So if there was a project funded with the community compact funding, they posted it. So there is an IT component. So I would sort of recommend that you take a peek around Community Compact and their IT grants. The city has been successful so far in getting 2 of those. They did one to consolidate the IT departments between the schools and City Hall. It seems like it might be a fit, but it's a good funding source if there was a match there.
excellent.
Well, no, that sounds good, Paul, and Jeff. Tom, you have anything to mention about the school? Everything's kind of just chugging along.
Everything's on target. The next big submission is the 29th of this month, I believe, or the 30th to MSBA for the next design phase. That's going to include the roundabout that's coming along too. So, yeah, they're mired in documents right now. Where's this outlet go? Where's this wall go? To try to get ready to get out to bid, I believe.
I'll just mention
July
one,
or August.
mention one thing about the school. It's a small thing. Well, I think it's a big thing. Anyway, the new superintendent dug right into the plans, and even though the plans are categorized as preliminary, they're quite extensive. And it was her recommendation that the media center, which is it's a library media center, was not in the right location based upon her feelings and opinion. So it was suggested to make a move on it and to move it. And number one, I think the move was correct, but number two, it opened up some savings that were actually significant. So it was just really nice. It was we have consultants, we have a committee, we have people working on it, but fresh eyes came in, and it was good. It was nice.
And the validation for Allison's recommendations was the architect said, those are great changes.
Yeah.
So here's the architect who drew up the whole school, and Allison's saying, move this here, do this, and do this, and they go and redesign it, and at the end of the day, they say, these are great changes. So, plus, to Dave's point, saving a little money.
Yeah.
Cool.
Next big submission, you said to the SPCA?
MSBA.
MSBA.
MSBA, okay.
Okay, I'm gonna jump to number 12, liquor licenses, because I keep things on track of time. And Casey had brought this up the last meeting we had, and wanted to know, we didn't really know anything about it, but I met with Alan Wolf, the mayor's assistant, who's on the license commission, and if I can remember my notes, but I do remember the theme, the flavor. So currently, Easthampton has 8 all alcohol on-premise liquor licenses, and there's a few more. those are your traditional historical liquor licenses. Then we have 4 wine and malt on premise.
Wine and malt?
Yeah.
Okay.
Then we have 2 special issues. That's basically, they were created by the act of the legislature. That's like for the log cabin, because the reason that log cabin is in 2 municipalities, the building itself is.
Yeah.
And then I believe Trade-ins, what was Trade-ins Restaurant?
India House.
India House now received one.
India.
And
Gloria
is that
Vineyard.
and that's a
No,
full
they-
one?
They received somebody else's license.
Gloria Vineyard?
Well-
Gloria Vineyard, yeah.
But anyway, okay,
Right next door to you, Mo.
Yeah.
Right.
but
Gloria Vineyard.
anyway, there's 2 of those licenses, and the city, the license commission, I guess, is under, I don't know how you say it right, is pursuing more liquor licenses. Basically, they're following Northampton's lead as many as we can get. And, it was, I guess the caveat though is they all have to be in an opportunity zone. And we have an opportunity zone, it's quite big, but it doesn't cover all of like Route 10, like it stops before the Verizon building, you know, in Southampton, and it stops partly on Route 10 somewhere in Northampton, Northampton Street. But it's a pretty, still a pretty big zone.
Dave,
Go ahead.
when you're talking about the 8, are those 8 that are still on,
No, those are actual licenses.
That are being, that are.
they're already
that are-
being utilized?
yeah.
So we
Yeah.
don't have any unutilized licenses available?
We do.
Okay, that's what I was.
How does that fall into what Dave said? How many unutilized
number for
licenses
that.
do we have?
2? That sound right?
Okay.
Two.
That's what Mike Tosnick said. He said 2. Kelly Ritchie said that they have, the board has the ability to ask for more licenses,
Right.
and that's what they're doing.
Yeah.
But I don't think they can ask until the other 2 are used.
So we have 2 remaining that are up.
Yeah.
And those are full, right?
And I guess
Those are non-transferable.
Right, that's
the-
over
that-
quota licenses,
Yeah.
like mine. I can transfer that to my location to somebody else, but I can't take that someplace
Okay,
else.
okay.
Right, and that's.
But they're full liquor though, not just
Full liquor.
Yeah, and that's what they want to pursue.
Yeah.
They're not trying to pursue the traditional ones. I guess the theory behind the scenes with the state is that they don't care anymore, that value's being taken away.
As long as the city councils are on board, they're on board. It's
Right.
their general sense.
So, I'm just bringing this up because Casey brought it to our attention, and I didn't know if anybody had any strong feelings one way or another. But the city, I guess, seems to have the view that it's economic development and they're pursuing it.
And they don't, right, I thought they needed a little catalyst
Right.
to be asked, but they don't.
Right.
And they're pursuing that
They're,
anyway.
they're,
So
they- right, they're pursuing it with, previously John Skybeck, but now Dan Carey, within the opportunity zone. And, if I understand it, like Casey said, that they're gonna be, I guess, location specific.
So my only question, Dave, is the restriction on the opportunity zone. So if it ends somewhere on Northampton Street, and that means it ends somewhere before the Northampton line, if Captain Jack's wanted a full liquor license for some reason, it sounds like they couldn't get it.
Right, but please don't hold me to the
Because, well, the same thing
boundaries.
is they got those other, I don't know, what, 5 or 6 licenses that were designated for the mill area.
Right,
And
yes,
they
yeah.
didn't go there. So, I don't know, because the license board had this weird thing, it's sort of like, all right, I know that city council said that that's what they're for, but yet, you're the only one asking, and you're not in that zone,
Right.
and we don't really have the ability to say no if there's a license available.
But no, that's right, Alan.
So you can put a restriction on, but it seemed like they had one before and it didn't matter.
Well, right, and Alan said that's, you raised a good point, is that they did it for the mill zone, but they didn't fill them up. So now they still want them.
It's just the mills just aren't ready.
Right.
Why is the Glory of India a special one?
I don't believe it is. A
I could be
license,
wrong on that. I could
a license went,
Okay.
oh, you know what it
But
was?
there was 2 of them though.
Yeah, Landon's original license was an over quota license. He didn't renew it,
Oh, okay, so I wouldn't know that. I
So
wouldn't
they
know that.
decided that they were still keep the license available.
Okay.
And then there were 6 people that asked for it.
So there shouldn't be any issue if an eventual restaurant, bar, whatever, at 1 Ferry Street, shouldn't be an issue getting a liquor license.
No, because the time to take a build out is at least a year, and the time to get the
Yeah.
license is about that too. So if you're just
This is the-
asking time.
If we have 2, this is the wrong term. I'm gonna call them, a pocket license. A pocket license used to be basically, like Eric Sewer was famous for in Northampton, holding onto a license, because it had value, but not utilizing it. Platinum Pony, which is gone, had a license, and the massage school has a license, and they're not utilizing it.
Okay.
So, the city is on top of this, and seems to be, asserting, they want to go forward with liquor licenses. And I told Alan that, I would just bring this information to the EDIC, and, and if they agreed with me, we would be supportive if at some time they asked us for support, and he said at the appropriate time he might,
Can I say something about the opportunity zone? So
Yeah.
we put together the request early on this year, last year now. It's very large. It's one of our most inclusive areas in terms of where it is overlaid over business zoning districts. So it goes all the way to Northampton, along Northampton Street.
Oh, it
So
does,
It's the
okay.
purple.
yeah, it's the purple, and so it runs along O'Neill Street. So this stretch here, or Love Field, so it includes everything to the left. So all of this, this Lower Mill Pond is the dividing line on this side, and Nashwanik Pond, and it goes to, not that we would be encouraging out here, so somewhere between Whitebrook and Williston's athletic fields, and then it runs all the way over to the west side to the river. So it's very broad and
So Jeff,
encompassing.
when you drew that
think-
line on Yellow Mill Pond,
Yeah.
did that cross Ferry Street?
Yeah, it includes the 1 Ferry Street property.
Okay.
It's based on census districts. So where the area, the one area that does get excluded is, it looks like basically past where College Highway Variety
Yeah.
is. That's about the cutoff point. So the rest of
The rest of Route 10?
the rest of Route 10 towards Southampton is not included. So that's like the one area that's not.
Mostly residential
Right.
through there.
Right, so I mean, for an area, it's a really good area that we got designated for opportunity zone, so there's a lot. There's a map online in the planning department too, if you're ever interested.
I just call you, I don't go online.
So,
Draw me a picture.
Yeah.
okay, so if everyone's in agreement that the steps they're taking are positive, when the time comes, I'll bring it up and we'll go forward. How's number 10 doing, Jeff?
10 and 11 have 10 has been my sacrificial lamb. I haven't made much progress on residential first floor uses.
Who are you sacrificing, the lamb or us?
So no, I haven't made any progress since last time. It's still a project, but
I remember.
haven't made any
That's the one
progress
with
since.
all the issues with the wording from document to document and Frankenstein's monster.
Yeah, and it comes down to a question of whether we apply it downtown or on like Route 10.
Mhm.
So I don't think it goes away per se, it's just kind of a little bit on the back burner at the moment.
So, I understood the CB, and I'm going to number 11 now, at this CBGB, the Community Block Grant meeting.
Yes.
There was a little bit of pressure about elderly living. Are you feeling it?
Yeah, I mean, we
Are
are,
you feeling it?
we're definitely cognizant of it and
Are you feeling it?
feeling the pressure.
Yes.
I think no, it's a really important topic for the city. I think it is not an easy, there's not an easy fix.
I don't recall a lot of discussion about senior housing. There was a lot of discussion about housing in general.
Right.
In fact, that
Okay.
was that's one of the first goals, is housing. But what I found interesting at that meeting, what were there, 50 people there?
30?
Okay, I was looking cross-eyed.
It's optimistic, 50.
So what was interesting though is people are concerned about taxes, are concerned about the cost of living in Easthampton, but yet no one wants to see growth for a lot of reasons. So, I mean, one way to one way to stabilize the value of homes is to increase inventory. It's gonna stabilize the values. But I increase inventory, wait a minute, you're gonna build these houses where I have a beautiful view across some meadows, or you're gonna create more traffic. And we don't want any more of that, but we don't want our taxes to go up. So it really is contradictory, because you can't keep your taxes low if you don't have any growth. And you can't keep your values low if you don't have inventory. So it was interesting, because the room was divided that way, where we want to see some growth, we want to see some housing opportunity, but we want everything to stay the same too.
Well,
See, the reason I'm being a little bit hard on you is,
issue.
you know, you take the Eastern Mass and other regions example of buying 2 lots or 2 houses, tearing them down and making one big lot. I would like to do the opposite in Easthampton, where you have 2 lots and somehow we make 3 lots out of them. You know, I think the classic example is on Maple Street and Olympia Street, where years ago the zoning got changed, and we won't go through the history. But
Across from Pulaski.
yeah, but the point being is, if, to get back to Tom's point, if you want to save open land and you don't want to degrade open land, then we have to be creative on our existing stock. And in the DB, that little thing was, the whole idea I thought was, I didn't really care about the success of that individual zoning mechanisms per se, as more along the lines, we gotta get in our line of thinking that we need to start becoming dense, appropriately dense. And it won't happen overnight, but if a developer can say, well, I can make 3 lots out of 2, we're not talking about tear downs and McMansions, we're not talking about crazy gentrification, but we only have 13 square miles in this town, and we want to preserve part of it. So that means we...
And Dave, if we look historically, I guarantee you those opposing viewpoints have been there as long as somebody's been living in East Hampton.
And it's not unique to
I mean, the
East
first
Hampton.
development I can think of is the KB home on Hoyoke Street. So that was open space. When you come down the mountain,
Yeah.
on your right, all those homes that kind of look alike, that was a major development that we did in
50s.
late 50s.
55 flood actually got part of that.
Then the Plains. I mean, when I was in high school in town, the Plains was one big sand pit. Today it's all homes. Well, everybody was kind of, and then the extension of the Plains and all the Golden Drive and all the homes out off of Hendrick. But I made the comment at the meeting, I thought I was gonna get hard and federally thrown out. I said, if you drive up Florence Road, on the right-hand side, as far as you can see, it's all homes. Why wouldn't the left-hand side say, it would seem appropriate if we had homes on the left-hand side too? I should have never made that comment at that meeting, but that's, I mean, as opposed to saying on the side of the mountain, or
Right.
as opposed to saying next to the parks or something, or what's wrong with how, someone told us a long time ago, if you kind of match what's on the ground, you're gonna be okay. There's already houses on Florence Road, why wouldn't houses be appropriate on the other side? When you look where homes are already, why wouldn't they be appropriate? But to Dave's point, we've only got 13 square miles. If some of it's gonna be restricted for open space and the rest of it's not zoned properly, where do you build the next home? So I don't know how many homes were built in East Hampton last year, maybe a dozen,
Well,
if that.
right, and just, there's no easy answers. And even just because someone says you have to be creative, that's not the answer either. But the thinking has to change a little bit, because we're gonna have a recession at some point, and this isn't doom and gloom. But even with that recession, you're still gonna see starter homes or low-end homes. They're not gonna fall, because there's just no inventory, and the pressure is there. But the problem is, after the recession, the pressure gets even more severe, when financing gets easy again and stuff. And I don't know whatever the rate of churn. I don't know. There is a natural rate of churn, and we're not there. Maybe we should turn over 30 houses a year. I'm making up a number, but whatever the number is that should turn over, we're below it. And I just think we need to, and it goes. You're more familiar with me. There's tools, small houses, accessory apartments, but I keep pushing on this, and I know city resources are stretched. One Ferry Street to me is definitely worth jumping on, you know, and things happen. You know, the marijuana is, you know, was very time consuming, but I just believe that somehow, you know, and if we can assist you, we gotta keep pushing, you know.
And Dave, I'm pretty sure you sent out that senior center study to
Yeah,
everyone.
yeah.
Just two things real quick. I mean, that went out to every resident in Easthampton over 55, and there were 1,800 respondents, which was a huge percentage. But just real quick, opportunities to adapt current housing, downsize or obtain housing with services are perceived as problematic in Easthampton. Can't downsize because I don't have a place to go. And then respondents were asked about the type of housing they would prefer if a change in health or physical ability required them to move within the next 5 years. And the type of housing they would prefer would be either senior independent living community or an assisted living community.
Yep.
That was 1,800 respondents, and that was their primary focus. If they were forced to move from where they are, they would want to be senior, independent, or assisted living. You can't find that in Easthampton right now.
So I don't.
So they leave Easthampton, is my
Wait,
point.
just quickly, I don't mean to beat on you as much as I want you to know that you have our support to help you with this.
Yeah, you know,
If we only knew what
it
the help.
is a,
If we only knew what the help was, I don't know what the answer is.
Well, I just think it's someone banging a horn, you know.
well, it's more than just banging a horn.
It's having locations.
It's having locations, and it's having a strategy, and it's having professional help to make the zoning work for Easthampton. So, I mean, I can tell you that after we get through this sort of, you know, exciting round of grants, the housing has definitely been an issue that the mayor and I have discussed many times. It's just where we've been really successful is matching projects to funding sources. And right now, there are not any good funding sources to help a community who wants to do this.
I thought I heard you mention last Wednesday, though, because the starting point, obviously, you want to build a house, you're going to start at the foundation.
Yeah.
Did you say there were grants available for overhauling or reviewing or assessing zoning?
Yeah, and I know that was, so, no, there's not. That was, I think my response to Bill Cannon was that that too is on the list to overhaul the zoning and make it more user-friendly and understandable, but there is no funding for
Okay.
that type of project. The state has talked a lot about, you know, goals for a lot of new housing units over the next 10, 20 years. So the expectation that we've had is that there will be funding sources available soon. So hopefully this year would be the year where we can match up some housing related projects to funding sources and get, so I've heard it, and I think we'll start to see some movement here, but I think what we really need is some funding to have assistance to jumpstart this. I think, as Casey said, I think it's looking at sites and then figuring out what type of zoning you could overlay onto that to really make sure that it's going to be an incentive to a
Well,
developer.
first of all, to be fair, this isn't a problem that's unique to Easthampton.
No.
I mean, every
No, no,
community
right.
wants it. But I'm curious, David, I'm not trying to put you on the spot, but if a developer builder owns a piece of land in Easthampton where they could put up 50 homes, I don't know how many acres that takes, but let's just say they could put up 50 homes. Why isn't a developer doing that project today?
I think mostly because, for subdivision, if he doesn't do, or he or she doesn't do cluster or multifamily, you know, the costs are not there. I mean, there's too many costs for, you know, for.
It's not
straight-
profitable to do.
Right.
So is there anything the city could do, and I'm not picking on you because I know who owns all the land.
Yeah.
And any of you, so. But I'm just curious what's holding them back, and that's one thing, the profitability piece, but is there anything the city could do to encourage them? So if the city went to Bernie and said, why don't you put a development in on Florence Road? Is there any incentive for him to do that from the city side? That's possible within current, I mean, is there a little tweak somewhere that said, Bernie said, if I could get this, I would do it?
Well, there's going to be potential zoning incentives, but we, as far as I know, we don't really have any financial incentives, which is an
No,
important
I'm not
aspect.
thinking
but-
financial, I'm thinking of
It-
density
Well, there's
allows
not-
more
there's not-
units.
There's not much room for waivers. You know, the density is pretty prescripted, you know.
Right.
Um,
One of the things I know as part of this discussion, I mean, it's also identifying what type of housing do we need the most and tailoring the zoning to incentivize that type of housing. So we don't necessarily want a lot of new subdivisions that are gonna be $600,000-$700,000 homes.
No.
But that's what our zoning says you can do.
No,
I think it's
quickly
all
by
of the
right.
above. I think if somebody were to put up 50 apartments, 1 or 2 bedroom apartments, they'd be rented within 3 months,
Right.
maybe sooner.
That's
If
a
somebody
call
were,
one ferry.
if somebody were to put up 50 single-family homes that say went in the 250 to 300 range,
Right.
they'd be sold within.
Right, but I think that from a developer's perspective, there is nothing that's going to drive them to build $250,000 homes.
When they can build, Dave
600.
used to say, a
Right.
2x4 costs the same no matter which.
Right, so that's what, and that's where we need assistance to evaluate that and put together the right sort of zoning package to really incentivize some movement on housing.
I think kind of loops back to what David said in the past, that when you have the senior living, a place for seniors to go and move out of the homes that they've been living in forever, well, that opens those up. You don't have to
Right.
build them, they're already there, they're
That's
just,
very true.
you
Yeah,
just
true.
can't get people out of them.
That's true, that's true.
I mean, I've said this before, it won't immediately solve the problem, it won't solve the problem immediately, but what the city needs is a housing market study to support what, you know, if you talk to anyone, anecdotally, there is the bottleneck happening at the older age group. But what we need a housing market study, which, you know, is a common thing for municipalities to do, to identify the market demands, where there's shortfalls and where there's housing needed, and then they usually come with a set of recommendations. And so that's the funding that I've been trying to match to, that's the project I've been trying to match the funding, which I think would thrust us into this housing discussion and like in full speed ahead.
Yeah.
To Paul's
So-
point too, you could really inject that inventory into any part of that cog and it would, so for example, if all of a sudden there were a pile of single-family homes, folks would move out of apartments and move into single-family homes, free up the apartments for new folks to move into the apartments. The senior housing, the report says,
Right.
I'm 75 years old, I don't want to leave Easthampton, I'm living in a 5-bedroom home that I've had all my life. My wife and I are living in a 5-bedroom home. I'd love to sell it to a husband and wife with 3 kids, but I've got no place to go.
Right.
So they stay in, and they're living downstairs and the upstairs is empty.
Yeah.
We've been sizing up, so we may have to duke it out over the community compact funding, whether it's telecommunications or housing, so that they're supposed to release new grant funds for the community compact. And the housing was gonna be the targeted kind of project for that to jumpstart this, so I think it's good. I don't feel beat up, but I feel like I understand the question and the pressure, so it's just, I think it's gonna be it is a critical issue, so
Yeah,
it's
it's
definitely
just that-
something that we're looking at.
You know, my experience of building, you know, is, I grew up in a business and, but, you know, I started in 1887 and the thing that worries me now.
1987.
Yeah,
1887?
1987, whatever. Yeah.
That sounds
Your
right.
age, man.
I heard 1987.
Go back to your grandfather. But, and it's even happened to our own little business right now. You know, in the 80s, you could take a nap and wake up and then worry about it. Now, if I have a problem, I can't snooze. And the market's just changing that fast. I mean, I'm buying a house in Tennessee right now, in a second home, and I'm seeing the same thing. The house that we're buying, we got in the door, but then as soon as I guess Google's doing a little bit, but Amazon is doing a little expansion down here. If I hadn't, I just lucked out. This is a house. It's just a house in a subdivision, but that house is already worth $20,000 more than what I'm paying for it. And you know, all I'm saying is when there's a wave, there's a wave, and it's just nothing you can do about it. It just
real
comes.
quick, just real quick, I promise, because I gotta get out of here too. I shared with Dave, I was at the Cape over the weekend, Route 28 at the Cape, Yarmouth, Barnstable, all those, it's very business, as you know, all businesses. About 6 months ago, they knocked down these 2 real tired 1960-ish motels, knocked them down, put up a privacy fence, have no idea what's going up. I go down this weekend, there must be 200 living units going up on that spot, right on 28. So somebody got creative enough to say, you know what, we're not getting any new business, as much busy as the Cape is,
Right.
but we need more housing. I don't know yet if they're apartments, condos, or senior living, I really don't know. But I bet there's 200 units there, at least, going up,
And,
in a business district.
you know, it's funny, because we're in a no-growth region, the Northeast. And I don't think our population in East Hampton is gonna go much beyond 16,000. But the pressures are there.
Right.
You know, it's counterintuitive. Chris, did you wanna talk about route number 13 by any chance?
It's a couple months outdated. There was a lot of rumors going around about Walmart, which I just wanted to say I don't think so.
Okay.
Although it's a good segue from what we're talking about with senior living. Is there a way, and this is a good specific property we could talk about, is there some sort of zoning overlay we could put on that to incentivize some sort of independent senior living? Because that'd be a great location, and so I'll end.
We're talking about the Tasty Top.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, Tasty
Well,
Top
is that,
parcel.
I'm sorry to backtrack, but is that project dead? Stop the
I
shop?
think
Yes.
Stop and Shop is dead, yeah. They've been surveying it like crazy though, like
Yeah.
tons of different crews are coming down.
Oh.
Well, they're surveying all of Route 10.
Is that what's going on?
All of Route 10 and O'Neill, and Pleasant Street, O'Neill Street's been surveyed. I don't know why.
By the city?
By a firm, I don't know.
By a firm.
Well, I've seen a bunch of different
Yeah.
surveyors anyway, they
Yeah.
usually park the Tasty Top lot.
I think the example I'd used a few meetings ago, Chris, was the industrial zoning on South Main Street, if you will. So if you're driving towards Southampton, all the land on the left, it's wide open.
Mhm.
That's been preserved for industrial, if you will.
Right.
So I've only been in East Hampton about 58 years, and we're still waiting for industry to come to that. Wouldn't that be, with the mountain backdrop, with setback, wouldn't that be a great senior living complex back there? But everybody says, oh no, it's industrial, we're still waiting for industry to come to East Hampton. It all left, guys, it ain't coming back.
Yeah.
But with that Route 10, I mean, it doesn't affect elderly, but R40 is one overlay that could be,
Right.
you know.
Well, I would say that the zoning on this parcel could support housing as written.
As is, okay.
Yes, I mean, so the observation I would have is that we might be too late with that one. Like, so we need to be eyeing the next parcel, the next area that we need to be out in front before there's a
I
for
lost you.
sale sign on
Why
it.
are we too late?
What do you mean too late?
My professional observation is that when the for sale sign is up, and you're talking about creating a creative zoning district that would go over a parcel, that's too much time that would be lost.
Too many gears.
We've looked at the zoning for Route 10, and that property would support a lot of units. So it's whether there's a developer who is willing to do that. And we haven't seen the developers knocking on our door to build housing here. Whether, despite the fact that we need it, I think.
I guess the only part I'm not sure about too late is if there's no one stepping up to the table to purchase the land. I don't know that, but if there isn't, then it's not too late till the shovel goes in the ground, I guess.
Yeah, well, we're usually not privy to those discussions once there's a
Unless
for
they come
sale.
to you and say, can you do like the Ferry Street project? And
Right,
there's,
right.
You know, a little bit.
So I guess I'm sorry, go ahead.
I think they comment.
Okay. I guess on the
Joking,
creative
sorry.
aspect of that,
Just
I don't,
joking.
and
That wasn't
I
to,
haven't.
yeah, that wasn't
thought-
to be dismissive of your comment.
Oh, no,
just
that's
saying.
fine, no. I haven't put much thought into this, but what about something like a 10-year tax waiver for specific things like a independent senior living project? Is that something that's legal even?
I don't honestly know, and I think talking about eliminating future tax revenue, I think is gonna be a challenging discussion based on the increased amount of taxes that are,
Although
going to
in
be
theory,
expected
it would
to
pay
school,
for
but
itself.
I think the idea is there.
Yeah.
I think there's gotta be other creative, I think it's the financial incentives that the city does not really have
But
a
the
great
piece I don't understand
toolkit
is when we talk
for.
about senior housing, it's going up all around us. So what's so attractive about Westfield, Northampton, Williamsburg? What's so attractive about those communities? So Rockridge does a major expansion in Northampton, Linda Manor does in